excited. Very excited. All right, I'm just going to start talking because you're all here to hear me, not them, right?
All right, friends, we are going to resume now. That was a longer break than we intended, but we're starting again. Now, there we go. Lovely. Thank you very much.
Oh my God, you guys all just got quiet when we started talking. That was, my head is flooded with the power. I feel invincible.
I felt normal. I felt fine about it.
Okay, well they bought me shots during the break. So if people liked you more, they would have bought you shots, and then you'd feel more invincible than I did.
That's probably true. All right, so invincible feels normal. We got the spectrum of emotions going on here. And I'm both literally and metaphysically in the middle here. So case number 2, round number 2. We gave you a Chicago case first. We're now going to talk about a Wisconsin case.
We're going home.
Right, we're going home.
Kate is not going home. Kate is going to apply overstate the Midwest.
Do you know why? It's because I know better than to live in Wisconsin. Sorry, not sorry.
So tell us about our next case.
I will.
Great.
He's a little dude named Ed Gein.
Was he little? Is that true? Or was you just saying sort of a little ditty about Jack and Diane?
He was not Jack nor Diane. They were doing the best they can, yeah. No, he was about average size, which makes him smaller than average for law enforcement.
And probably smaller than average today. Because we've got.
It's only like 50 years ago. Like, size matters, Nick.
Size does matter.
It really does. So.
I stand mute on that.
The women on the panel believe that size matters.
Size matters. Hands up.
I'm
so ashamed.
You matter. Size matters.
You matter. Size matters. Something matters. I don't care.
Does everyone know who Ed Gein was? When we say
Psycho. Yes, Norman Bates. All of the things. Okay, so I'm going to start over because we're recording a second time through. So, my name's Kate. My podcast is called Ignorance Was Bliss. I am a former forensic psychologist and crisis clinician, and I try to make weird shit sound normal. Yes. They make not normal shit sound weird.
Fair.
Could be true.
I mean, it's possible.
Right, I'm Nick. This is Jessa. We are the progenitors of the Getting Off podcast.
What word did we use?
Progenitors. Huh? Are we back?
We're back. We're always back.
So the Getting Off podcast is ours, and today we're calling this Getting Off Was Bliss.
I like that he had to read his own bracelet to know what we're calling it. That's cool. Okay, we just gave you a quick and dirty, extra dirty review of Leopold and Moe. And this time, Ed Gein. Ed Gein is a creepy little guy. I'm going to do a really quick background on this guy because I don't really care. As a psychologist, I don't give a shit about his family background. I'm cool that way. It's because what I care about is what specifically got him here and what makes him like this now. And then what are we going to do with it from here? So he was born in 1906. And he says he has a smothering mother. Stop me if you heard this. No, don't stop me. I have the mic. And father who drank too much and occasionally beat him about the head and shoulders.
This seems fine so far.
It's normal to me.
That everybody here has experienced that. That's why you listen to true crime, right?
True crime. Father, raise your hands. Father. No, never mind. Don't. I don't want to know.
Daddy issues for the win.
Daddy issues.
Shots for the daddy issues.
I'm waiting.
But this is really a mommy issue case, is it not?
That's it.
It's both. You can't have. You really can't have just one. It's like Pringles of issues. You're going to have daddy issues, you're going to have mommy issues, you're going to have neighbor issues, you're going to have fire issues, and you're also going to have nipple belt issues. Ooh. Ooh. Raise your hands. Please don't raise your hands. Please put them down. Okay. So this guy effectively had a kind of normal life for about the first 28 years of his life. That he had the smothering mother, like you do. He had the alcoholic beating up father, like you do, okay, never mind. And 1944, he's 28, brother died, an unusual structure fire. Okay, I think Ed Gein did it. I really do. I really think I totally think he did it. I think he killed his brother. I think he maybe killed his mother. I absolutely think he did. I'm so sorry. I think he did it.
No, setting aside the presumption of innocence, this guy totally killed his brother.
There's a big difference between legal guilt and factual guilt.
Yeah.
And let's not talk about legal guilt for just a second. I'll let them do that. But factually guilty as fuck. Okay. So. No, there's no alleged here. I just think he's guilty as fuck because I've had enough wine that guilty as fuck sounds cool. So, in 1945, mother died of a stroke as far as we know. Maybe a second stroke. You can never have just one.
Pringles.
Again,
This episode is proudly sponsored by Pringles.
This is why I don't have any sponsors right here. And so what I'm going to talk about is not so much the legal stuff as the psychological stuff. That this guy, I mean, everybody would like to safely assume that you're crazy as fuck if you're wearing your neighbor's nipples as a belt. If you're sitting on the skin of their backs as your chair. Everybody check your chair. Are you sitting on wood or are you sitting on your neighbor's skin? Okay, Tina, you're always sitting on wood, we know. Okay, don't start. But so, this guy is arrested. Again, gonna let them handle the arrested part. He's arrested for the murders of 2 women, and oh, by the way, grave robbing, because, oh, by the way, how the fuck did you get so much skin in your house? I mean, it's a legitimate question. And so I'm going to talk to you about the psych evals first, because the first psych eval happened a solid 12 years before he was actually tried for actual murder. And in this psych eval, he says, first of all, and this matters to me a whole fucking lot, that I was coerced. It was a false confession, and that's a real thing. I can make anybody in this room confess to something you didn't do. Don't believe me? Come hang with me after the show. That's what I thought. If you're tired enough, if your IQ is low enough, you and me, I'll make you confess. If you're confused enough, if the cops promise you enough, if you haven't had enough sleep, you will confess to anything just to get out of the situation, because it's scary and it's hard and you believe the police, because why would the police lie to you? You're a good guy, except when you're not, because you killed 2 people, but whatever. Oh shit, we have glass breaking. That wasn't me. Cool.
Jenga.
It's always good. Later, he said, well, okay, I did some grave robbing, as one does, like you do. But I did not have sex with the bodies. Does anyone know why he did not have sex with bodies?
I know why. That's not the reason for this. The reason for this is they smelled too bad.
They smell bad. Like that has ever stopped a dude bro in the history of dude bros.
In case anyone is wondering, the 21st century equivalent to that defense is, she's not my type.
Or she didn't tell me no. She must have. I don't know. She must have meant yes. I could see it in her eyes, even though her eyes were dead. Wait, shit! I don't like this at all. Let's just keep
No,
going.
I do like it though. Like, I really like to fuck a dead eye. I mean,
No, he wasn't looking in the eyes. He was just making eye contact.
desolate desperation in the eyes of their intimate partner. I mean, like, that's the dream, right? Like, yeah, I mean, that's what I would say. I guess it's me.
I went to that college. I know those guys. Okay. But so that he didn't have sex with bodies because they smelled too bad. He also, in case you were wondering, could rise the dead with the power of will. This was not a church thing. This was just him.
He believed that? That was the belief
That
that
was
he
his
held?
statement, yeah. He could rise the dead with the power of will, and that he was under the influence of evil spirits, but only when the cops weren't around. This is important. Because if the cops were around, he knew how to behave, and therefore...
So the lesson is that evil spirits are really good at figuring out who's the snitches.
Evil spirits know who the cops are, and therefore he's competent to stand trial so far. First step, right? That another guy, he said later, like, look, I was coerced into confessing. One of his psychiatrists said, Dr. Schubert said, questioning this man requires a great deal of tact, because we're known for that. I want you to go find me a psychologist who works in a locked state unit and find one that has tact at the same time. We don't do that. Anyway, questioning this man requires a great deal of tact because he is extremely suggestible and will almost invariably agree to any leading questions. That's not so much a low IQ thing. That's just a personality style. What did you do last night? I'm so sorry. Like anybody who gets that weird, guilty cringe going through TSA when flying to Chicago, for instance, maybe that was Gowb. That was totally the
I
truth.
feel guilty about basically everything I do.
I'm saying, if they're like, have you ever done this thing? I'm like, I'm so sorry, no, but I will.
Like, my paralegal and best friend is here in the audience tonight, and she refers to me as a guilt child because I just preface everything with an apology so that I can do whatever I want, but I seem sincere. Right? Like, I'm sorry, I'm just going to railroad you. I'm sorry, but I'm going to talk for 2.5 hours and tell you to fuck yourself. I'm sorry, it's just going to happen. No offense, all due respect.
Are you sorry, Nick?
Often.
We're all sorry.
But I have a question for you about suggestibility from a mental health psychological perspective. Is it unrelated to intelligence or unrelated to IQ? Or
are they correlated?
I think that they are not correlated. I think that it's easy to make a really smart person feel guilty because you just said you did.
Yeah.
And so I think that the two are separate issues. That you can be really smart and feel guilty over every fucking thing, and you can be really not smart and not understand what guilt is. So suggestibility too is about you can be really smart and be sort of very easily like, oh my god, I'm so sorry I did the thing. Like, I'll put it back. I totally don't have a bomb, officer. And you can be not very smart and be like, no, what are you talking about? No, I didn't shoot the man with the gun that you're holding in your hand at the time.
But you have video of me shooting. That's somebody else.
No, totally different. And, different episode. But, so, the whole suggestibility thing, once upon a time, was a big deal. And we'll come back to what once upon a time means for this guy, specifically. But the point is, people recognize this dude is suggestible. I can get him to say anything. And, I mean, I had kids that I can do that to. So, it's kind of fun, except when it's awful. She's right there. Everybody say, hey, Emily.
Hello.
Hi, Emily. Emily's fantastic.
Thank you.
She really is. She's a talented artist and a wonderful human being.
Thank you.
And that's just what I'm going to tell you. She gives me hope for the future.
She's also guilty as fuck, so it's good.
I don't have a gun. What?
We
I
don't want
didn't
to do
kill
away
her.
with things.
What? Never.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Another of his psychologists said, this guy had a personality that was introverted, odd, and withdrawn. Podcaster.
Ha!
No?
Not trial lawyer. Trial lawyers are extroverts.
Podcasters, hands up. That's what I thought. Yeah, okay, but you're guilty.
I'm not guilty.
Uh-huh.
I never do anything.
Right.
I never did.
Guilty? I never. Guilty? Always. See? Anyway. So, mental status evaluation is like a really quick and dirty version of, is this a functional human being? And the answer was, yeah, basically. No real hallucinations. He saw faces in leaves. Have you ever been walking through the woods and seen faces in leaves? Don't answer that. Because that was enough to have him qualify as delusional. As fuck, I think, if you want to get clinical about it. That no hallucinations, no delusions, very unusual others hanging them upside down in your shed, and then decorating your house with their skin. I hope that's unusual. Please let that be unusual. Is that unusual?
I actually have some facts on the decor. What I tried to bring here tonight was the aesthetics of the situation. So, Ed Gein, among murdering at least 2 people, arguably 3 if you count his brother, he dug up graves, and he had like a little grave robbing friend, right? They dug up graves together. They dug up like a shit ton of graves, okay? And he goes like full Lost television show and puts 9 heads of women up on the wall. And he makes chairs and suiting and all sorts of accoutrement of female skin.
We're gonna have like the pose on your lines.
Yes, including
The lips flip around. It's very exciting.
including but not limited to a belt made out of female nipples that he pulled out of the grave. Which Hot Topic sells those. Check it out. Enter coupon code getting off pod 10 for 15% off your nipple belts at the Hot Topic at your local Illinois mall. But he really had a thing for the decoration using human body parts, which, like, that's just fashion. That's avant-garde fashion. And that's what he put in his house, and as Kate's going to continue to tell you, the police didn't so much like his style.
Kate, what do you call that? What is that? What is
that,
what is
Kate?
an explanation?
He's, I'm pretty sure, an interior decorator. No?
Is that a DSM term?
I think what we're looking for is liberal. He was liberal.
He was creative. He looked around, he saw what needed to be done, he was practical.
Yeah.
Kind of an engineer. It's fine. I mean, okay, he was fucked. The guy was fucked up. Was he crazy? I hope so. Like, I legit hope so when we think about what crazy means. But the reality is, in terms of, did he know what was wrong? Uh-huh. Did he know how to work with a lawyer? Probably. Did he know not to jump up on his table and shit in the middle of a trial? As far as we know, he was competent to stand trial. But we don't know that for a while. For a while, it takes a while. I'm saying, as far as we know, we being the psychologists at the front of the room. Okay. So, he thought of his bodies, mine, like dolls, as one does. I mean, dolls are creepy as fuck too, are they not?
I'm sorry, buddy. Oh, he's just
Okay,
no, we're just talking about dogs.
Dogs. Dogs, not dolls.
Because I don't think he wants to be a chair.
I mean, okay. Nor do Dean's victims.
No, I know.
Okay.
That's also bad.
So, one of the things that the guys talked about having a poor ego structure, and so real quick and dirty, because I fucking hate when Freud is right, but he's right in this case. The concept of ego. Who am I? Think of a circle, and it's a nice round circle, and it's fairly, okay, let's say you just got a tattoo. For instance, I don't know why that comes to mind.
Because you did
Because I
that.
just got 3. Anyway, but if you happen to do a circle, you want it to be a nice, say round shape. You don't want extra lumps in any places. You don't want any breaks in any places. That's your ego. It's a nice circle and it rolls along, right? If it's too thick, then it's a bad ego because you can't get enough in and you can't get enough out and you end up kind of being fucked. And if it's too thin and you have a lot of breaks in it and it sort of gets lumpy and slouches down, that's bad also. You just want that nice round circle to roll along. And that's how Freud functioned. And the problem is he's right in this case where an ego that is nice and round, that functions, that lets information in, that lets information out, you get to roll with other people and you keep doing your thing. If you're too broken, you collapse. And if you're too thick, then you don't roll with life the way you need to. You're a pervert. My God.
Thick with 2 C's?
So was Freud. I mean, sometimes a cigar is just okay, no, it's not. It's a penis. But so,
Dude, like, real talk, when I was in high school, I used to read Sigmund Freud in the bathtub and fucking masturbate like it was nobody's business. Okay, like, I'm not saying that the guy was right. I'm just saying when I was 16, I really fucking got that. Okay?
Anybody show of hands? No, you know what? Don't.
Nick is so chagrined right now. He's like, I'm just so
He's stuck in the middle.
Right in the middle.
Yeah, you're stuck. Okay, so, but the moral is, this guy, poor ego structure, which basically means that if I sit across from him, he collapses into whatever I want him to look like. And if Nick sits across from him, he's going to collapse into whatever Nick wants him to look like. And if you sit across from him, he's going to collapse into whatever he thinks you want to look like. Because he's a pleaser. Like, you know, that guy where you're like, would you just fucking tell me what you want to dinner? I don't want to order your meal. What do you want? And they're like, I don't know, what do you want me to want? That's Jenga. That's not broken glass. Now I know.
Someone's
But see,
playing Jenga.
someone's Jenga structure just
Which I
collapsed.
encourage heartily because people
Totally.
should have a distraction for this.
I'm saying.
I respect the multitasking. I'm A-okay with that.
I'm totally good at that.
But that's an excellent example, is that your Jenga structure just collapsed. Right? Because it wasn't solid. Anyway, shut the fuck up, boys. So the moral is, he fell apart easily. And he said what he thought you wanted to hear, but he didn't have a real good view on who you were, and so he made shit up, and he was bad at it. Okay. He had an IQ of 99, which is bullshit. It's fucking bullshit. You don't do that. You have an IQ of plus 99 plus or minus 5, give or take, because your IQ on Tuesday isn't going to be your IQ on Wednesday. And I'm going to try to get off this soapbox because nobody asked me to climb up
Well,
on
but
it.
I actually have a question for you. My understanding as a layperson is that the average, and I'm using air quotes here, IQ is 100. So 99 would put him, if you accept the validity of the test, okay? If you accept the validity of the test, which at least some proportion of the population does, then he's a normal guy, is the point that I want to make, right? Am I wrong about that or am I right about that?
He's a normal guy if normal guys don't read other people very well. Emotionally and personally, and I'm going to stop now, I'm so sorry. But the moral is like, yeah, he's within the normal range. He's functional in terms of, you know, say, living several decades into life and not getting caught. He's functional. He knows he's doing bad things. Stop doing them. Like, he gets the rules and he mostly breaks them only when people aren't watching. Yeah.
All right, so hold on. I think everybody that's listening here is familiar with Ed Bean, but just for the record, here's what's up. Like, this guy killed at least 2 people and then would cut pieces of their skin and the skin of bodies that he dug up from graves to form furniture that I referenced earlier.
Not only for
Also, he built a suit for himself of human skin. Why did he do that? His purported reason, and I want to hear about this from Kate, is that he wanted to turn himself into his dead mother, who was his one true love. So that's like the 30-second version of what crimes we're talking about, in case people don't know.
Right, and he was caught. He was taken into custody in 1957 after he was suspected of having murdered a woman who owned or ran the local hardware store.
Oh, yeah, the other one was the tavern.
Correct.
The one he wasn't convicted of.
That was what attracted law enforcement attention. That was what got law enforcement into where he was living, which is where he had lived with his mother and his brother for many years, both of whom were dead. Once they got onto his property, they found the worst house of horrors of all time.
This cornucopia of human condition.
Well, yeah, this tableau that, that almost immediately led to Psycho, the movie, and then years later formed the basis for Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs. So it has occupied, a lot of our imagination. So, right, so he's interrogated, and he winds up admitting to or confessing to all this grave robbing behavior as well. Correct?
Okay, first of all, he did not have a dick in a box. I just want that out there. But he only sort of, he admitted that maybe he kind of remembered some of it, sort of, and he thought maybe he'd done it, but he wasn't really sure. Like as happens when I find a box with a human head next to me in my shed, I'm like, I don't know. I mean, could be me. Not sure. I've seen these photos. So, like, in the recent days, I've kind of... Jesus Christ.
Maybe it's Maybelline.
Like, is this a box with a vulva in it, or did I just get the wrong delivery from Amazon. Like, I mean, anyway. So this guy, despite knowing right from wrong, despite basically being able to work with his lawyer, despite not hopping up on the table to have to take a shit during the middle of a trial, just not paying to stand trial, because he was seen as being sort of so weak and so pathetic that, well, he couldn't be sane. I mean, he must be crazy.
So now the defense attorneys come in, and like this guy's totally not competent, except back in the day there wasn't a competency statute in Wisconsin. So this is where shit gets interesting from a legal perspective, which is this guy, from the time he was arrested to the time he went to trial, was held in a mental institution for 10 plus years. He had never been tried of any offense. He had never been convicted of an offense. He was afforded the presumption of innocence. But because he was, and we are quoting because the notes we have on our table, part of those have the 1957 Wisconsin statutes on the insanity defense. Yeah, that's right, we did that. Real talk, our paralegals did that. But,
Because we asked them.
yeah, but there was no rule in Wisconsin about how you dealt with if someone wasn't competent to stand trial. So while the psychologist would tell you this guy was competent, the law back in the day, and I'm going to let Nick read you the statute, said there were two types of insanity. One was insane at the time of offense, which is your NGI trial, was I mentally responsible for the crime I committed? And the other is insane at trial. Today, we call that competent to stand trial or not competent to stand trial. But back then, the statutes were all sort of blended to say, if somebody is not sane enough to stand trial, then we're going to just ship them off TBD to the mental institution and hope that they one day get better, and then we'll just pull them back and try them for this homicide. No big deal there. No questions need to be asked. We don't need bail. We don't need to talk about, like, their due process. We'll just park them over at the central hospital and let it go on.
Indefinitely. By the terms of the statute, that could last indefinitely. That is very, very, very different than what it's like today.
Yes.
So they didn't have the word competency back in 1957. They used insanity for all this stuff.
Well, or they used my favorite phrase, feeble-minded.
Feeble-minded.
And that's like the legal words. Those are the court words for deciding competency in 1957. Is if a defendant is feeble-minded, ...
Right. Feeble-minded, right, either at the time of the offense or at the time of trial.
Sometime in there. Just pick one.
Well, it's essentially the same standard for both, and that is not the case now. Today, competency and NGI, not a plea of NGI, the legal standard for those two things are related, but are definitely not the same thing.
No, they're not even remotely the same thing. People can be found not competent to stand trial who would actually not be NGI. People can be NGI, but they're totally competent to stand trial. They're two different legal standards.
And I'm going to step in just so that we're all clear. Like, NGI is not just like a bingo thing. Like, you get full board coverage and bingo. Like, NGI.
It depends on your lawyer, though, because if you hire us, we can make that card.
Yeah. But not guilty by reason of insanity means I was fucked then. Not competent means I'm fucked right now.
Right.
Like, I know I'm getting all technical here, but I think you're along with me by this point in the evening.
So, Kate, it is true that in 1957, after he was arrested and charged, he was charged with one homicide, and that was only the woman from the hardware store. He was not charged with the homicide from a few years earlier that he confessed to. And he was found insane or feeble-minded such that they were not going to try him. And why was that? Why did they find him insane or feeble-minded at the time?
They said, okay, first of all, what I really think is cute about this guy, cute and fucking adorable, is that he goes to this hardware store. She has a gun there in a hardware store like you do in Wisconsin, you know.
I mean, you really do.
I mean,
that's
a thing.
True today, it was true then. We have guns everywhere.
Yeah.
We have
And
guns
so
at Culver.
here's what's exciting is that he was in a hardware store and he just randomly had a bullet in his pocket and he doesn't know how it got in the gun and she's dead. Like, that was his confession. I'm maybe paraphrasing, but that was his confession. And so the cops grilled him for several hours over several days, and he confessed to all kinds of other shit, including grave robbers, including killing another woman a couple of years earlier. Very exciting. And he was then not competent to stand trial, which is not the same thing as, and in this case this is important because it's a 3-day difference. Because he was arrested one day, 3 days later, they start the competency to stand trial process. So there's really no split in time between were you fucked then and are you fucked now.
In this particular case.
In this guy's case, this particular case, there was a 3-day difference. And they said, we know that he's not competent on the basis of judgment because he blames spirits for what he did. Okay. He also blamed his neighbors because they didn't pay him adequately for doing yard work. Seriously, write this shit down. He then also was not, on another level, not competent to stand trial because he couldn't possibly work with a lawyer or self-advocate because he was so suggestible, which seems awfully easy to fake. Ask me something. Never mind. You're right. I'm sorry. Yeah. So he was found not competent based on these things that are wicked easy to fake, except the point in time that we are right now. In 1957, this is what matters. And so shall I hand it over to you for legal shit, or shall I just keep rolling? Because I'll just keep rolling all fucking night.
We can talk about the legal shit.
Oh.
All right. So, as we have previously mentioned, it was a 10-year period of time between his initial arrest and his trial. Now, in, America, we sort of think that there's this idea that when you get arrested for something, you, have a trial, and the state has to prove that, and you're either convicted or you're not, and you can have a different trial about whether or not you're sane, and we'll send you to the mental institution or we'll send you to the prison, but you're going to have some process.
That's so cute.
That's not what happened for Eddie. Because back in the day, the statutes did not facilitate any sort of review hearing to determine if someone had advanced in their competency. And Ed Gein's diagnosis, as I understand it, and I'm using those words as air quotes, was number one schizophrenic, though from my layperson understanding there was more or less nothing that indicated that in any reality.
Everybody in here is more schizophrenic than Ed Gein was at the time of arrest.
Okay, I appreciate that you're validating my feelings. Number two, a sexual psychopath.
Yes, way more schizophrenic than Ed Gein was.
I'm also way more of a sexual psychopath because that's not a fucking diagnosis, and it never was. And sexual psychopath was a diagnosis? In the DSM?
Sexual psychopathy was a thing.
Because we always argue that the DSM has never classified psychopaths. That's a point that we argue regularly as defense attorneys.
Homosexuality, though.
Oh, that was in the DSM.
That was. So you're either homosexual or you're fucking dead-ridden. Those were his choices. And so, the psychologist said it's a lot easier to talk about this guy who's a homosexual, although there's no proof of this.
Isn't that the allegation about how your career dies in politics is that you either fuck a dead girl or a live boy? Isn't that how things work today?
Is that the Gein test?
Yeah, that's the Ed Gein test.
Copyright.
But so he languishes for 10 years, which is sort of fascinating because we've advanced the Wisconsin statutes to build in a review process, right? If you're found not competent today, we have you reviewed by a psychologist and a psychiatrist after 3 months, after 6 months, after 9 months, after a year.
It's required.
Yeah, it's required. You have to come back to court and they have to write reports and there's cross-examination and there's process and you sort it out. But back then it was hey, you've got a nipple belt, so I feel like this quandary has been solved. Because nipple belt clearly is not at the Pottery Barn for sale.
No, that's Restoration Hardware.
Right, that's Restoration Hardware. You can buy it there. That's fine. And so he doesn't actually have a trial until 10 years later. as defense attorneys, you and I were both like, what the hell happened here? How can you hold someone without giving them a trial, without giving them process?
It's us.
Yeah, it's you. It's totally you.
It's
Like, you did that. We didn't do that.
Specific. It's the psychiatrist, not the psychologist. I just want that out there. There's a big difference in that the psychologists know what the fuck we're doing when it comes to diagnosis and treatment. Psychiatrists then do meds. Cool? Different? Okay. Different. Matters to me. So the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, DSM. As you may have heard, if you've ever been diagnosed, please don't raise your hands for this one. And
No, that's all reasons.
I mean, okay.
Who's been diagnosed?
I can't raise both hands.
I don't
Yeah.
think that only happens.
All right, everybody, raise your hands. It's we've all been fucking diagnosed with something. So
You guys
here's
listen to me talk twice a week, like freely.
here's the exciting thing about the DSM. So the DSM, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, is based on military shit that came out of World War II. And the first DSM was published in 1952, so following it up a little bit. And the answer was, you're probably crazy, or you're not. But it's pretty clear, like anybody can tell.
So when he was arrested, the DSM was a Chinese toy.
When he was arrested, the DSM-1 was in place. And a really important thing about the DSM-1 is that, first of all, homosexuality equals a personality disorder. So it's the same as having borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, all kinds of other shit that can make you a real asshole, to get technical. So then what happens is a couple of years later, 1968, DSM-2 happens. Still
a couple of
homosexual.
years later, the guys in the institution without process. Just
Yeah,
10 years later.
I mean
it's fine.
16 to get specific,
He's
but
alleged
whatever.
done really
Who's
bad shit.
counting?
We can toss him in a mental institution for a decade. Nobody needs to care.
Okay, that's the psychiatrist. It's
whatever.
not the psychologist. I'm so sorry. Anyway, so
Yeah, I'm gonna fight with you about this.
you should, but you should fight with the psychiatrist, not the psychologist, because they tried hard. Okay, but here's an important thing. First of all, homosexuality is a personality disorder, which means you see, personality disorder means like you see the world differently than other people do, but you don't realize it. Like it just feels normal to you, and you don't get why everybody else is fucked up and you're not. That's borderline personality disorder. That's narcissism. If you think you're the most important person in the room, you probably are. Back away. Like, it's a thing. So, this guy was seen as homosexual, which means he sees everything as homosexual, because you're not just gay when you have sex. You're also gay when you're, like, walking through the woods, or the cemetery, or, digging up graves. That's a gay thing. It's a total gay thing, blame the gays. It's bullshit!
Can't confirm.
I mean, Isabel, when you're going to Restoration Hardware, it's bullshit. But that's how this
I
happened.
did not do that whatsoever.
I mean, it's ridiculous. So, 16 years later, DSM-2 comes out, and it says, okay, we're going to adjust some things because clearly we were wrong, but the gays are still fucked up. It was the psychiatrist, it wasn't the psychologist. I'm so sorry, it wasn't our fault. But seriously, that was the idea, was that we are trying to categorize everybody. We're going to try to put everybody into a very dark lines of here's what you are and here's what you are not. And that way, that makes you okay or makes you not okay. And this guy happened in the middle of all that. And so he's arrested in 1957. 1968, totally coincidentally, right about the time that the DSM-2 comes out, and they say, look, it's extra bad to be gay or to fuck your neighbor, especially when they're dead. That's how we know
I feel
he's
like
messed
those
up.
are three separate tiers.
Not in the DSM-2. And in
But I
fact,
feel like
fun
there's like
fact,
sex with somebody that's the same gender as you, and then there's like sex with your neighbor, because that could get awkward. And then I feel like there's sex with your dead neighbor.
let me just say, not if you're a psychiatrist. Okay.
I'm concerned about your profession.
No,
Like,
I'm not as
I
okay.
feel like you should distinguish between dead and alive
That's if you're a medical
for sexual
doctor.
attractiveness purposes. Like, I
That's
feel like
if
dead
you're-
and alive is a binary that we should all be okay with.
Not if you're a medical doctor. They don't seem to care.
All right, that's just my
Welcome
view.
to health insurance in the United States of America. I'm saying. And so it just so happened that DSM-2 comes out and says, this guy's still fucked. I know he's fucked. You know why he's fucked? Because this little book, it says it. Now, the DSM-2 is like this thick as opposed to the DSM-5, which is like this. Which
For the
means
record, Kate is indicating that she had
bigger.
The DSM-2 is approximately 1.5 inches thick, whereas when she indicated what the DSM-5 was, it was roughly 4 inches in length.
Size matters, my
Make a
friends.
record.
Yeah, size matters, my friends. Bigger, more stuff wrong with us today. But at the time, they were like, well, look, being gay and fucking your dead neighbor, totally the same thing. And so we're going to say this guy is sexually confused somehow. We don't really care how. Lock him up. And that's a lot of how it happened. That's how he was found competent to stand trial in 1968. Because we're like, look, you know,
Because the DSM
medically,
so
the
the
DSM,
science changed.
yeah,
So
the DSM changed, but it didn't change away from where he was.
Right.
It didn't
He
change away
states
from the
that.
change. And so he was fucked then. He's still fucked now, but he's still functioning. And so let's try him.
Which they did, and now I
They
think Nick
did.
and I take over. Which they did. He was found at GI, and he was ultimately committed to Mendota Mental Health Institute, a place that is dear to my heart. It is 7 minutes from where I live. That I have been to more times than any person should ever visit.
Right.
I have had to take off my underwire bra to get into there. I have had to disassemble my pen so that I just carry the sad, tragic, flaccid inner chamber of a pen to allow my client to write with it while I walk down the long hall and slide my sad, flaccid portion of the pen through the slit in the door in which I have to communicate with my client where he is sitting in a room where there's a mattress with no bed, because that is Goodland Hall at Mendota Mental Health in Madison, Wisconsin, and that is where we keep people who are mentally ill.
That is the maximum security hall at Mendota.
Yeah.
Which is where he wound up. So one thing that was interesting to me about this was he was determined to be insane or feeble-minded in 1957, and on that basis, he was indefinitely sent to the state mental institution, which at the time was called Central State Hospital, which is actually now the exact same building that is a prison called Dodge Correctional Institution.
Yep, we've been there a lot.
A lot, we've been there a lot too. A lot of our clients have been there a lot too.
A lot of clients.
So 10 or
We're
11,
not very good lawyers.
10 or 11 years later, he is determined, for the purposes of being able to stand trial, to be no longer insane or feeble-minded, at which time he has a trial about whether back in 1957, when he committed the homicide, he was insane or feeble-minded. Because again, back then they used the same language, both for what we now call competency and to evaluate what we now call NGI. And but here's an interesting legal thing: it was a bench trial, it was not a jury trial.
Right, and that was because his counsel ultimately waived jury and the state stipulated. In Wisconsin and in, I think, every state, but definitely in Wisconsin, you have the right to a jury trial. You can waive that right. We required the state to stipulate to the waiver of that right. So he was tried to the bench and found NGI. That is very common in Wisconsin. In fact, most NGI trials, even today, if you're dealing with the crazy or not crazy, and I'm using really flippant language there that is not medically accurate, but if we're talking about just the question of mental responsibility, that is by statute determined by a jury in Wisconsin. However, a lot of times, strategically, lawyers will choose to waive the jury trial because the facts of the case are sufficiently prejudicial, meaning scary, that we don't want to tell 12 ordinary citizens about them. We'd rather that the judge who's heard every story in the book make a determination about mental responsibility.
Right, so there was a week-long trial to the bench, or to the court. That's actually, court trials, bench trials, whichever you want to call them, are actually very common in criminal courtrooms in Illinois. In Chicago in particular. Yeah, not common in Wisconsin at all, very common in Chicago. It is almost the norm to have bench trials and criminal stuff. When I first came down here and I was looking for a job, people were like, wait, you've had how many jury trials? We don't do those here. That's weird.
What's that? You let people decide things?
Yeah. And so it was a bench trial, and it was a
decide what this all means. They just, it's fun.
right. So it was a 1 week bench trial, at the end of which he was found. Yeah.
Yes. Are you sane and are you guilty if you have a belted nipples?
Well,
Don't answer that.
bells of nipples, per se crazy or not?
I'm gonna go with fucked.
I feel like Alexander McQueen is gonna do that. Like, I feel like the brand is gonna move forward. I think that's their 21st century.
It's really hard to mass market that shit though. Especially because it's just hard to pull it through all the belt loops. Like you have to think about it in a practical sense. No, you don't.
It would be
You
moist.
don't. It's not okay.
I think it's
It's
fine.
not okay. Especially if they're moist. What is your problem? My kids are gonna be like, are they moist nipples? I don't have children. Anybody. That's what you should learn here.
Okay, I want to talk for a minute about his explanation of the human heads on his wall, though. And normally we don't love like the tragedy porn aspect of crimes, but this is like so fucking classic that I have to share it with the team. He was asked like, "What's up with the human heads on your wall?" Right, which is a pretty normal question, I think. When you walk in and there are human heads mounted, you're like, "Hey, how come that happened? Like, where'd you get those?" That seems problematic. I don't know. I'm gonna flag it.
How can I get one of those on my wall?
But he was like, no, it's cool, and here's why. My cousin was a veteran in the war, and he brought these heads back from the Pacific as trophies, as war trophies. So I hung them in celebration of America.
America.
So, like, you can judge me for my human heads on the wall, but that means that you hate our country. That's how that works. That's unclear to me from my research, whether or not they're Pacific Islander.
There's an extra level on this.
I believe it to be World War II. I believe that these
Yeah, it was right after World War II. That was the idea. And as an extra level on this, as I'm doing my research, I had shared a lot of this stuff with Jessa on my Google Drive. And so over time, I would be opening my Google Drive for other potential things, as one does. And you scroll through, and you're like, here's this thing, and here's that thing, and there's a motherfucking human head. And I'm kind of pleased with myself for continuing to have that reaction. Like, I feel like that's a good thing, and I slept better at night because of that. So, yeah, still crazy, died there. Yeah?
Yeah, he died in Mendota in the 1980s.
1984.
But here, I think, is the interesting legal thing, and Nick, like, take this over. What's interesting is back in the day, there was really no functional difference between being found not competent to stand trial, meaning you are so adult, like whatever's going on with you, whatever clinical issue you have, you don't know what is happening in your basic surroundings. Because, like, believe me, the standard for competency is very low. It's like, who's the guy in the black dress? That's the judge. Cool. Who's that lady over there? She wants to put me in jail. That's the prosecutor. Great, we're good. Who's that? That's my friend. That's the defense attorney. Carry on. Like, you don't need to know very much to be found competent to stand trial. But back then, in Wisconsin, you could be determined insane at the time that you were supposed to stand trial and be hospitalized indefinitely in literally the exact same place that you would go after you had been convicted but found not mentally responsible. So there was no functional difference between being found not competent to stand trial and being found not guilty by reason of insanity. Which maybe that doesn't seem like a big deal to people, but as lawyers, what that means is you get to house somebody back then. You got to house someone in identical circumstances to where you would house them after they had been found to have committed a homicide, regardless of their mental state. But you didn't have to have any trial to do that. There was no process by which you determined that we're going to hold this person in this institution. It was just alleged that they were feeble-minded. A judge basically checked a box and off they went indefinitely. There was no, by statute, mechanism for review. There was no way for him to say, like, hey, I'm actually better now. Can I have my trial? The thing I'm constitutionally entitled to. I'd like that now that I can participate in my own defense. That didn't exist back then. And in fact, our NGI law in Wisconsin wasn't reformed until 1981. when we started to go through the process of bifurcating competency and NGI in a trial context. And Reagan's attempted assassination with the Hinckley case reformed NGI all over the United States, and different states started to implement different laws about how we could find someone not guilty by reason of mental defect or not. And as sort of a byproduct of that is we started to define what it meant to be competent to stand trial in the first place. And that's a really important distinction from a mental health perspective, I think, but certainly from a legal perspective. Because if you've ever been a lawyer working with somebody who's in acute crisis from mental illness, they are unable to assist in their own defense because they can't engage in a conversation that is responsive and meaningful with their lawyer. And they might know who the judge is, and they might know who the defense attorney is, and they might know who the prosecutor is. And that's prong one of our competency standard in Wisconsin. But prong two is whether or not they can assist in their own defense. And if you don't know what's going on, you can't assist in your own defense. And even if you make the chair of human skin, you should probably know what the fuck is going on before they lock you up for the rest of your life, I would suggest.
Right. And the shocking thing to you and me was, think about it this way, his circumstances changed not at all.
The DSM changed.
Well, no. But from a procedural perspective, his circumstance, well, and substantive perspective, his circumstances changed not at all from before he was found actually guilty of committing the homicide and to have been NGI at the time he did it. He spent 11 years in this hospital before that, and he spent the rest of his life in the hospital after that.
Right, and
that's nuts.
I feel like I hope that the message that we're portraying here is if you are not competent to stand trial, is it okay for the state to hold you for a goddamn decade before they try you? With no review mechanism and no process. And of course, we ultimately decided the answer is no, we're going to build that into the statutes, but that's legitimately how it worked back then. And people justify that because the crimes were horrific, right? Like, it's a good story. This guy is, he collects skin and makes furniture out of it. He is the basis for Buffalo Bill, which, as a total aside, he would make this suit out of skin to make himself into being a woman like his mother. Some research that I did on this issue suggested that meant he was trans. I wholeheartedly reject that. I don't think that that's a fair representation at all. I really want to stress that I don't think that it is remotely correct to suggest that there is some parallel between being a transgender person and making a suit out of human skin. So if you Google that, don't think that those two things are the same, because that's fake to me. And again, Kate can speak to that more than I can, but I read that and I'm like, this is so transphobic and nonsensical.
It's bullshit because it's the difference between being and dressing up. This guy dressed up.
He dressed up in a really
He
special
dressed up
suit.
in a fucked up way, and so let's not confuse that with somebody who doesn't feel right in their own skin. That's not the same. It's feeling right in someone else's
Right,
skin.
there was no
Like legit.
gender identity disorder. There was no.
That wasn't a thing. That wasn't a thing.
Dysphoria.
Gender dysphoria and gender identity disorder weren't a thing. But seriously, I'm not trying to be flippant. That feeling wrong in your own skin is not the same as feeling right in someone else's skin.
Right, and I just some of the research that we did suggested that this was somehow a trans rights issue, and I just want to be perfectly clear that I reject that. So
Right, it was, especially because nobody was
Like-
trying to protect trans rights in those days.
Right.
Like, fuck all,
like
that
that's
was
a
the
21st
attitude.
century
This was,
retcon of a really bad order.
he was bad. He was bad. And ultimately the thing is, this guy was not well, but that doesn't mean he was insane.
I think one thing that's interesting about this case is, he got labeled as schizophrenic, right?
He was not motherfucking schizophrenic.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
But that was sort of a catch-all then for we don't understand your shit. It's concerning. We're going to give it a name so that we can be sure that other people aren't going to do this.
Schizophrenia is a thing. It's a very specific thing. It's a scary thing. It's a thing that gets better with medication. This guy didn't have the thing, and he was scary, but he didn't have the thing, and he didn't get better with meds so much. It's just that the definitions changed of what fucked up is, and so.
And to translate that into, just as we did with Leopold of today's topics, we're still having conversations legally, right? Like there's this divide between the law and the psychiatric community, the psychological community, about what constitutes a mitigating factor for personal responsibility and what constitutes an aggravating factor for personal responsibility. And the law is very slow to evolve on this point. And again, not justifying anything that Ed Gein did or anyone else, but right now we're in a place where we as defense lawyers rely on experts that know, for example, that a 16-year-old's brain development doesn't look like what a 25-year-old's brain development does. We know that, or at least the people that we contact that know things about brains tell us that, and I believe them because they're credible and they're experts. We know that we are punishing people as though they're fully aware of the risks that they are taking, when in fact, oftentimes we have underdeveloped or inadequately developed neurological function, and we're punishing it exactly the same as we punish someone who has that full capacity. I'm dropping my notes, whatever. That full capacity for engaging and evaluating their own behavior. And the NGI statutes, I mean, back when Ed Gein happened, you know, it's like 2 paragraphs. Now there's 6 pages. So we've done a lot, specifically in the state of Wisconsin, to try and delineate competency and NGI and define this. But that didn't happen for a really long time. And the line between who we put in mental hospitals in the 1950s and who we put in prison in the 1950s was a really blurry, really thick line. And I would suggest as a hypothesis that we define that largely around our ability to empathize or understand what the person did in the first place.
That's where the empathy part is that how fucked up is what you did. Like, this guy did a fucked up thing, ostensibly, and let's go ahead and say objectively, he did a fucked up thing. It's a series of fucked up things. And so should we just brush him off and lock him up and say, well, look, he must be schizoid? Well, no, he was never diagnosed, from as far as I understand, he was never diagnosed as schizophrenic. It was said he had schizophrenic process, which basically means we don't know what the fuck he has.
We don't like the way you think.
We don't like how he thinks. We don't get how he thinks. And so let's lock him the fuck up until we get how he thinks. We're going to get how he thinks by redefining what we get, which is not the same as actually getting what he thinks. And so I would argue that if you would like to cut down on things like, I don't know, serial murder of neighbors and wearing nipple belts, maybe you should understand the dude.
I feel like we should all embrace nipple belts. I don't know what the hesitation is. I don't know.
I don't want to stay at Jess's house tonight. I so don't. Oh my God. I'm now terrified, and I've totally changed my mind about everything. So anyway. Well, I mean, he did
What
that
else do you have
too.
to say about the 1957 example and GI statutes? Nipple belts.
I've said what I have to say about that. It was short, it was small, they're a lot longer today, they're totally different today than they were before. They used the exact same language back then to talk about, to define and address 2 concepts that we now define very differently. And that was actually stunning for me to read.
Well, and I think that it's a valid conversation and one that needs to be had more to say, we define the person as incompetent based on the best science available at this time. 10 years later, we define them as competent with the same best available science at the time. 20 years from now, we might define them completely differently with the best available science that exists at the time. And the law moves slower than science does. The law moves slower than research does. The psychologists that are doing work and studying this diligently, and by the way, there's a plug tomorrow at the Chicago True Crime Podcast Festival. We're going to be presenting with LA Not So Confidential to other psychologists who are going to talk more about certain behaviors of offenders. with us. But what's interesting is, to me, what's legally interesting in this case is that his personality didn't change. His psychological makeup didn't change over that 10-year period in which he was found incompetent and then deemed competent. What changed was the definitions in the science. And so all of a sudden, someone that was incapable of being tried before became capable of standing trial because of a change in a book with diagnoses and not because of a change in his status. And I feel like as a society, we have to ask why that's something that happens.
And I mean, the reason I kept pointing out homosexuality is not because it really had anything to do with his case, but because guess what? It's not sick now. It's not wrong now. It's not bad now. The science has changed. The world has changed. Catch up.
So that's a very interesting topic to me. And in fact, Nick and I would plug our own podcast and suggest that you go way back and listen to our Andy Steele episodes, where we talk about a case that we tried together in which we advanced a defense that was based on a neurocognitive disorder rather than a traditional like schizophrenia diagnosis. But as the science changes, the law has to catch up, and how that plays out in a trial setting. And I think we have to look at responsibly as people who participate. You know, like, I don't know that we need to just take it as Bible or gospel that the science is right. But at the same time, I think we have to acknowledge that there's something fundamentally inconsistent about changing a person's legal status based on changing science. I don't know.
I applaud the notion of using whatever the best information we have at a given moment in time, science and medicine.
Yeah.
I applaud that notion. But we're talking about, and this is what I think forensic means, and we'll talk about this more tomorrow, that, you know, it's the application of science or medicine or psychology or psychiatry in a legal context. And those are two different things, right? Medical diagnoses or psychiatric diagnoses and legal standards are not aligned. They are not the same thing. So we're when we do that, we try to meld two worlds, and that's not.
And they're often years apart in terms of the research, the drafting, and the technology.
Law has to be secondary. It has to follow human behavior. It can't predict human behavior entirely because we don't want to lock people up based on what we think they might do. We want to lock people up based on what we are absolutely positive they did do. Psychology and psychology have a little bit more squishiness in terms of what we think they might do and why we think they might do it. And that's fine, but keep those apart.
Yeah. So that's Ed Gein, his weird psychological profile, and
the law behind how
the creepy mental health aspect of it.
Indeed.
Also, don't wear nickel belts.
Or do.
No! I'm putting
I'm just a contrarian. I'm going on record as firmly pro-nipple bound. Don't censor me. It's fair. I'm allowed.
I censor you.
Yeah. You're vegan. It's fine. That's all I've got.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We are grateful. We are appreciative. Thank you so very much. Sincerely. So, this was Getting Off Was Bliss. I am Nick.
I'm Jessa.
I'm Kate.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.